Does body composition matter for our performance? What are the obvious links? What are the obvious, or maybe what are the less obvious links? Does body composition matter for performance, Gemma? Does it need to be
Definitely
measured?
does need to be measured. Did you measure
Myself or
Mm. when you played? Did
obsessively?
did you?
Obsessively. Early in my career, it was pretty bad. I remember actually, I remember being in college one day and being in the showers with one of my friends, but one of the best players in the team, and actually pinching my stomach. And he actually turned around to me and he said, you're deranged. Are you actually serious? Are you actually serious? There's nothing on you." But in my mind, there was this one particular pocket of body fat that I thought, and it was actually just skin, really. but but that was, yeah. I measure. I didn't. I measured it by something ridiculous on site in my own observations. Nothing. There was no skinfold measurements. There was no idea of what weight I should be. There was no, certainly was no accurate measurement. It's in your head.
Mm. And you've got no support like in those early stages to even influence a change in like understanding. Yeah, I think it's so easy to fall into that where in your head it makes sense that it matters because you can see the comparison, the difference between elite athletes and how they might physically look, and just take that as the goal, and then not recognize the steps in order to actually physically to be an elite athlete, to mentally be an elite athlete, and what it take on the ground day to day that influences body composition.
I went from that way of thinking, that very specific, I need to be lean, like really visibly lean. And I was looking at him, of course, and he's ripped to pieces. And that was my version of what it looked like. No matter what my body fat, it was never going to look like this other athlete who was 6'4" and a completely different frame. But I went from that to becoming really interested in rugby and seeing rugby physiques and going, oh no, that's the physique I'm after, which was equally as, I don't want to say damaging. That's not the right word, but in the long term it was, because I went after the wrong type of training. But that education point and that guidance and that awareness, how critical that is in your development.
What do you think it is that leads to? It sounds like it's a shift in goal there.
I went from thinking that it was being really lean for fitness and mobility to being really powerful. Like, I had this idea in my head because I wanted to break through into the Sligo team at this point. All of my friends were playing for their senior teams. All of the stories were coming through. Sean Brady was playing in Cavan, and Mark Ward was playing in Meath, and Joe Sheridan was lighting it up in Meath, and I was, yeah, all I wanted was to break through for my county team. And then it was this idea that, like, crash ball, this ability to break the tackle down the middle. I'm actually really serious. Like, it was this idea that I won't be stopped if I develop enough power, which led to taking creatine ridiculously by, moving then to again, the overconsumption of calories and just lifting as much weights as I possibly could,
Mm.
which is still not that uncommon.
Yeah, yeah. We hear it every week, uh, and it is like not having that support or the understanding, the knowledge to influence otherwise. I think that the drivers are still the same, like wanting to want having this idea of like what you need to do and wanting to like be the best in your sport, but having the wrong direction and how easy it is to get lost and all of that and go down the wrong path and never actually, yeah, achieve the outcomes that you're looking for.
While we talk about things quite personal to us and our beliefs and values and attitudes towards these things, I don't know if I've asked you in our public conversations like this, This would be an interesting see. Do you openly share how this has sat in your mind? So we've had a great insight in previous conversations to your earlier influences around body composition and even bodybuilding at one stage. What about your more recent changes? In because you have physically changed quite a bit over the past, how long? Is it 2 years?
Probably, yeah, probably 2 years. Yeah.
How does that difference sit in your head, and how, maybe for people who are listening, give a little bit of insight to what has changed both in your behaviors or physically?
My biggest change probably has come from, I would say, really dedicating it 2 seasons ago, really dedicating my approach to better understanding what I wanted to get out of football, and knowing that it was coming to like the final couple of years, and like what could I actually do from all the learnings that I've had, like actually understanding my story from like better, from when I was younger, like what my challenges were, and then if I really want to, I think what really mattered to me was like being a good influence. And so I was doing all this research. There was like in practice working with clients. And I felt like it was really important to me, if I'm speaking about this and learning about it, I have to be able to live it. And then focusing on like what does performance really mean in this context for me? What does it mean for showing up day to day? And like it actually just pushed body composition out of the question. Like it was not a focus for me, and that actually letting that go actually helped me so much to approach my day to day so much better because it wasn't a driver of my behaviors. Whereas I
So
previously,
you got into better shape by removing it from the equation.
yeah, by not focusing it as the goal.
Wow.
And it could, because it wasn't like any time I had that as a focus or it came into my head, it disrupted my day-to-day pattern. It made things more challenging in my head. Like it was like pressure.
So what did you do? Why- You were overeating. I can't believe I'm laughing at this, but I mean, this is about our relationship. I mean, I'm not taking anything from how serious that point is. How is the pressure undermining your behaviors?
The pressure from myself of
Mm,
like needing to, I suppose, I don't know, look a certain way,
mm.
which is ripe in sport. Like you're surrounded by it, whether it's in social media or looking at other athletes, and also cameras and photos, and doing a lot of more public, getting more public exposure. I think there's a risk of that pressure even more, and it can definitely, well, it definitely did influence like my probably the pressure I was putting on myself day to day. And I think that made it harder to, anytime I focused on like the food, or I could easily get into like tracking and feeling like that gave me that sense of control, but then it didn't lead to.
I guess what I mean is you got yourself over the past while from listening to you, you took the pressure off yourself, but that allowed you to improve your body composition very significantly. Like you've got the data to support it. But what was the pressure doing while, how do you feel that impacted your eating behavior or decisions, or what was the mix there?
Probably, like I'm using food more emotionally,
Okay.
but just that, like it just, I don't know, it wouldn't have been a major problem in my eyes, like day to day. But I definitely noticed the link of the higher the pressure I was putting, more pressure I was putting on myself from a body composition point of view, the more I would feel like a sense to restrict, and then a sense to like completely let go
Oh, that's interesting.
in more frequent moments.
Because this is very recent.
Not really.
Ah, it is.
I'd say that's a good, like, well, in the past 5 years.
That's recent. And it's
Pretty
more
sure.
recent than that.
But emotional eating is, uh, unless it's a, I guess, a major I'm like, it wasn't a major problem, but it's a realization that how often it can be used and how it can negatively impact habits and behaviors.
Absolutely. I think it's less talked about in sport. I think it's less talked about with athletes. I've had these kind of conversations privately with athletes, but I don't know if talking about the dressing room environment and even my own experience of being around players who are in incredible physical shape. I mean, that very presence in itself. I even know when I was in Dublin and Leinster, I would want to be, as a practitioner, being around those athletes, you would want to be in good shape. It would be an influence in itself. Like your environment is a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think it matters to because it's you have to be in good shape to be an athlete. The issue is when that is the drive, like that is the driver, and you see that as the kind of the goal, and not actually just focusing on other processes like to be fit and fast and strong. What does that require?
And we then see a huge misinterpretation of what it means to eat in order to be fit, fast, and strong. That's where a lot of the noise or conflict will come from in information or contrasting information, where you'll get diet related advice being used by athletes who have huge training demands, and
Mm,
there's this mismatch in how people are approaching their food, which leads to, again, what it's very common in our industry, where you have the restriction and overeating, and
mm.
there's a lack of that sense of, right, there's almost like a loss of confidence in how to eat.
Yeah, I think what also a big change for me was also training schedule, like a complete dedication to this is what my program is, as opposed to maybe always training, but not actually having a proper structured approach and knowing that like there's like days where you do have to do the rehab, do the zone two, whereas it would have been like quite a high intense, unless it was intense training, then it didn't make sense until you like learn it, like learning about programming, because that then aligned with it aligned so much easier with nutrition and like habits, like position them beside each other as opposed to like working against each other. Felt again, I think all that comes with just that was the goal that I had set out that season, and it hasn't changed.
I think what's very interesting about your story, just from obviously we've had different conversations about how you approach things, and I see your schedule not in great detail, but I know how generally what your week looks like. You've been able to maintain a physique as well with less pressure, and I think that's been an interesting thing. Like not an awful lot. Like you've maintained a lot of those habits, but there was also some, like there was insights that you shared along the way that it felt and feels sustainable, and you even linked to some aspects of your recovery.
What do you mean?
I guess what we haven't really called out, or not, it's not called out, but being more specific about, was you got stronger and you got leaner during this period of time.
Mm,
And you have maintained that strength and that leanness over a prolonged period of time. That's what I'm
mm,
talking about specifically here.
mm,
And in our conversations, as we would have talked about it, and as you were going through that transition, like you went after it one particular preseason, and you've maintained it. But you also talked, when we talked about it, you said that you feel like your recovery has been better.
mm.
And you
Yeah,
said that you had data to support that.
yeah, definitely in the off season, early preseason, became harder to maintain good recovery during the season. Naturally, just not having like like our the schedule changed, and it was like it definitely became harder with like sleep and later night training sessions, later night. So it became harder to recover as effectively as I definitely was in the earlier stages. But you have to do more work to be more recovered.
Mm.
That was the biggest thing in the later stages, particularly now coming into the end of the season. But the maintenance is still going back to what I said. Like it has never been the focus um to focus on body composition at all throughout the season. Like that was never a target or a goal that I had set for myself. And to look and see the data and still care and appreciate that body composition has to come into the equation, but for it to that not be a personal, like is no longer feels like it is like, I don't know, my identity or needing to look a certain way. It's like placing so much value on how much I care about being strong, being fit, and being able to maintain um we've got strength metrics and speed, and that being so like such a huge part of my goal. As if I can maintain those, like this is what I'd have to do, and I'd have to be getting good quality sleep. I'd have to be taking appropriate time to focus on my recovery, my Achilles, managing all of that. Like the focus became so much more about those tinier details, because that's going to allow me to be fit, fast, and strong. And naturally, if that's what the goal is, the body composition takes care of itself. But like, I'm not getting confidence from looking a certain way. I'm getting the confidence from um,
Performing a certain way.
performing a certain way, and feeling a certain way as well, I would
Yeah.
say.
Well, I give a little bit of context in this space around both rugby and GAA. We did monitor body composition, and there were targets, and there was mistakes certainly made in how we went about it. And by and large, by using it as an education tool and really using it, particularly around injury, to be able to give an indication of readiness to perform, what body composition looked like with peak behaviors in place, like really good behaviors around nutrition recovery and where people were at their best. Having those reference points were really good. So I also would say that it definitely, there's a sweet spot between within monitoring between the pressure that it can bring versus the motivation
Mm.
and the accountability. So I would absolutely say, you asked the question around monitoring body composition. I would absolutely say that it is important to have your markers, to understand the context, but also, like, I would say that a big part of it from an accountability perspective or from an education perspective is actually understanding the timelines associated with it. So if you have a goal in place, by really understanding, and I've used this reference so many times, young athletes understood because of the monitoring process how valuable 1% change was, because of how much work is associated with the 1% change in lean mass or body fat. So it took away what people looked like, it took away what their weight was. They began to be able to associate, if I want to get that 1% improvement, it means eating my breakfast. It means eating after training. It means eating this type of way. And I think there's a real value in that.
Yeah, it provides so much more weight in the conversation for sure. Yeah, because if it is just a matter of like it's a number on the scale, or it is just a number and it doesn't actually bring it back to the work that's required, it kind of mismatches it doesn't really create a picture that is tangible and from a action point of view.
But no athlete was coming in and saying, "Watch this, I'm going to be down 5%." There was
Yeah,
nobody saying that. Nobody
yeah.
was caught up in the noise that you see so often.
Mm,
And the other thing that's so valuable within it is people understood, because we see the evidence of it. Athletes understood that any sort of restrictive behaviors undermines progress. So if you're restricting energy intake, or you're not hitting protein intake, or you're not getting enough carbohydrate, then your body responds negatively. You have potential to lose lean mass. Body fat percentage actually increases. So nobody wants. So that's another aspect of the monitoring where you're getting that feedback on the positive behaviors are being reinforced. So I think it's just so critical to understand the context of it and how important the interpretation of the information is, and that it's set around people are being using these tools or using body composition the right way. There's a message that I hear an awful lot and you mentioned it at the beginning, but it's this idea of being bigger is performing better, and yet how much that can undermine, particularly young athletes, just getting that message. Like I would have thought just now being bigger means
Mhm.
eating more, more gym, and the risk of injury and the risk of the lack of confidence and the implications of that with no proper plan in place
And for like the likes of rugby players,
for likes of rugby
there,
players,
yeah, like
RGA, but rugby for sure.
males, yeah, males definitely. It's the opposite in a female context. It's like smaller is better.
What do you mean?
That would be the driving factor towards like more restrictive eating habits. Whereas sometimes the messaging, and especially like rugby players and consultations recently, has been eat more, lift more in an unstructured kind of manner, and a more pressure on just getting big.
We always talked in Leinster. They were and in Dublin, but most definitely in rugby. There's phases of development, and obviously S&C coaches with a high level of expertise and knowledge understood you wanted an athlete to be stronger or to gain muscle mass or size. You're looking at a minimum of a 6 week intervention. So you've got 1 or 2 phases in the year where that was going to be possible. So, don't expect an athlete to be bigger in season or go after that as a target in season, because that's in complete conflict with the specific on field performance goals. So sometimes athletes could be taken out because they recognize the coaches or people within the environment recognize that it was such a high priority. Athletes could prioritize a phase of development even in season, but then there was a recognition. You're not expecting them to perform at the weekend.
Just from a phase point of view, then they're actually doing it in phases too, and not put the focus to in season to make these changes.
Exactly. So phases of development, you then become very clear if you've got a young athlete who's 18, 19, 20 maybe, you've got potentially two, maximum 3 phases of development, which means you're looking at an athlete achieving their peak physical potential over a 3, 4, 5 year period. You're not expecting an athlete to go from being at this particular profile at 19 and then be physically ready a year later for, senior professional sport or rugby. And this is the kind of context and information that is so important for coaches to understand, that or those maybe even the players to understand, without placing that pressure and expectation.
What do you think the most important thing is for someone to not put that pressure on themselves, and like what would actually reset and allow them to keep the focus on the main thing as the main thing?
I always recognizing expectations being clearly defined. So we always talked in Leinster, and again with any athlete. Even last week, this week, I had some young rugby players, and it's recognizing the value of the progress of, what does a good week look like? What does 4 good weeks look like put together, and then what's the outcome associated with that? So that can mean recognizing, right, if I'm training 3 days a week, that I begin to eat well before and after the training, that I've got a schedule in place, that I know when I'm training, how I'm recovering, and how training is being adapted. Like if you have to have the right plan in place for that goal. And then what's possible based on a month. And if you've improved your body composition, if you've improved strength or aspects of power, and you're getting these elements, these kind of fundamental behaviors right, then your body composition improves. I've never seen it ever in a situation where these components have improved. If the goal is enhancing muscle mass, for example, and you're getting these right, that they haven't. Very, very rarely. Sometimes it just takes a bit longer. The time is the only difference, but it happens. The accumulation will happen. So it's just recognizing, like, we would always say 2% is what we're looking for across a group. 2% improvement, 2 kilos of muscle mass, or 2% drop in body fat through a phase of development. And when you have those reference points, then it feels so much more achievable and attainable when that's done like that. And if it hasn't, there's usually, if it hasn't been hit, or there's usually a reason:
Mhm.
illness, injury, something has happened within the training plan, or they've been pulled in with the something away from what the initial goal was.
Mhm. I find it so fascinating, like when sometimes when we're having conversations with maybe people that aren't in sport training, like have a training plan, or maybe they're training for a marathon and there's a heavy training block versus when you experience the detail that is needed, like the level of like planning that would be needed in order to achieve a goal when it comes to program and making appropriate adjustments. Like for example, if there was a period where I wasn't reaching top speed, and going back then to look at my rehab and the change in the program for my Achilles to reduce that pain, it was like this, it completely changed how I was approaching the week to week, and like that helped reduce the pain, got the speed back, and that was the adjustment that was made. But then putting that into the context for maybe someone else that might be focusing on, saying body composition is the goal, but then when you ask, like, why are those changes? Why is that the goal? Why is that important? What's it for? Like, if you got to this point, what would that allow you to do? So then really starting to focus on, like, if you have a specific performance goal, it will allow you to put those things in place, make the needed adaptations to achieve the goal. And as a byproduct of that, that's where body composition changes can favor what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're forcing the body composition, but then performance drops, what is it for? Like, is that what's going to give you the satisfaction? Is kind of where the mismatch I think is.
Yeah, and I think you starting with that point in what the big changes were for you, it was actually what drove it was your ambition to make the most of your playing career as a and to be the best athlete. What were the actions that needed to happen for that to potential like that be the outcome?
Mm.
So it's this kind of domino effect or trickle effect. It's so fascinating. Any winning moments this week, Gemma? Personally, professionally?
Professionally, I would say so. I will say last week, I had two young female footballers on, and they are of similar age in different same sport, both footballers, but they one's from Ireland, one's from the UK, and to hear their two different experiences, their challenges. They shared it so comfortably with each other, and then for them to hear them give advice for each other because they were struggling with opposite things. And one was really strong in one area from the mindset point of view. One was really strong in the nutrition side, and then they swapped advice. And I just sat back and listened to their experiences and them to have an incredible discussion. So they're two athletes that are on our performance program, working one to one, but now creating this kind of small group for female footballers that I think I'm excited to explore a little bit more in that. So that was definitely probably the first moment where I felt like this could be we're on to something here.
That's very cool. I had one experience of that where I introduced a Dublin footballer to a Leinster rugby player, and I've never forgotten it. The way that they connected, uh, it made me think about how we can facilitate that an awful lot more. And I mean, that's a big part of our events, but also our programs. Well, I actually have a very different one that's more related to us as a team. And it's the gratitude actually that I have for the space that we're working in. I had 2 weeks of very different environments. I was in Kerry last week with some friends, and I was in just off the week before. And we have got to a very exciting place as a team where I could genuinely be present. Still, obviously thinking about what we need to do as a team, but that I could be present where I was and feel like as a team, a lot of the work that we were doing was like the momentum never ceased. It continued to develop, and then all of the developments when I came back. I mean that's I know it's quite a personal thing, but we as a team now all have our own, we all have our own stories that are developing. And I'm, I just feel like there's so fortunate to be able to get to this position. Like there's absolutely loads to come, and we feel like we've only just started. But the types of conversations that we're having are now starting to really come through. You know, the conversations we're having as a team are coming through to support our athletes better. And then the support of our athletes and what's happening with them within their performances is taking us in a certain direction. And
Hmm.
that's a, I feel like it's a very cool stage that we're in.
Yeah, I agree. I think even reading what comes through every week from some of the clients recently, I've definitely noticed even a shift in like, oh, they've stepped it up a level. Like, what could I do here?
Yeah.
I think it is inspiring once you start to, yeah, see it all come together the way it has.
So the podcast around like the drivers behind finding the winning moments and what those things are and what winning moments actually are. Seeing that evolve is very cool.
Yeah.
Until next week, Gemma. Thank you.